Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. I'm Manu and he's Stefan Bienkowski. It's the end of the week. Stefan, I'm exhausted. I don't know how you feel. I can't wait for the season to draw to a close. Yeah, we're almost there. We're almost at the end of the week. We're almost at the end of the season. How excited are you for this? We might get some conclusions this weekend.
Yeah, I'm very excited. As you said, you know, even though it's the penultimate weekend of the Bundesliga, it feels very much like the one that everyone's had their eyes on for some time now. As you said, it's the one that might end up deciding the title before we come down to the final few fixtures. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. There's actually some other great games in this weekend, but as we were kind of discussing our games of the week, we have to kind of stick to the blockbuster ones because the whole world, I think, will be watching to see how Bayern and Dortmund do this weekend.
No, absolutely. There's a few things that can be decided this week. I think we can find out potentially who's getting relegated, right? We can find out some of the Champions League spots. I think Leipzig can nail down theirs. I think Union can too, depending on how results go, right? So there is decisions top to bottom that could be made, but it also could go into the final match day with us knowing nothing, which is what we, I think, all hoping for. But yeah, it's going to be hugely fascinating, I think, to see it all unfold. My only beef that I have, and this is, some people might prefer it that way, some don't. This match day used to be everyone kicking off at the same time, like it is this case with the final match day, and it's not. And I don't know how you feel about that. I preferred having matchday 33, matchday 34 all take place at the same time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's two obvious fixtures that probably should be getting played at the same time this weekend, which we can get into after the break, I suppose. But I think that's it could potentially throw up some psychological kind of aspects to each game. But yeah, I know I do agree with you on that one, but I guess that's just the way it is, isn't it?
It is the way it is, and we should get into it. So let's jump into it after this break. This episode of the Gegenpressing podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, BELIEVE, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That is BLEAV for 50% welcome bonus. Bet online, where the game starts. Yeah, have to get the sponsors in there. They pay for this. Also want to point out that this is in association with Get German Football News, who are really kind, posting our predictions and spreading the word on this podcast. So I want to give them another shout out on this show. Check out their page. They're really up to date with the latest German football news in English. Great page. So check out Get German Football News. Yeah, Stefan. So the Friday fixture, this is one that we tend to make fun of a lot. But it is one that has some pretty big implications. This is Freiburg against Wolfsburg, right? Both teams still playing for their position in the table. Freiburg are still in the race for the Champions League. Wolfsburg in the race for what could turn out to be a Europa League spot, is currently a Conference League spot, right? The number 6. Depending on what's happening in Berlin for the DFB Pokal final. So this is actually a pretty big game of implications, and I had a really hard time separating the two. I don't know how you felt, but I ended up going with I don't want to say boring, but because it could actually ended up exciting, but I went with a 1-1 draw. How about you?
Yeah, I've gone kind of similar actually. I struggle to take pull these teams apart. I think in terms of form and just how both teams have played this season, I would kind of lean more towards Wolfsburg, and that's definitely what I was doing actually. But I don't know, there's just something about it that makes me feel like Freiburg will kind of dig in. They haven't had a great run of form recently. And, as we've kind of talked about quite a lot this season, they do tend to struggle when they come up against teams who have the quality of a top 4 side, which I think Wolfsburg do on their day. So I think this is a really tricky one for Freiburg, but I just can't really seem to pull these two teams apart. So I actually agree with you. I think the Friday game is going to be a match in which both teams take a point, and ultimately that won't do Freiburg any good if they're trying to, grab that top 4 spot.
No, it wouldn't, because the next match that we have to discuss is Hoffenheim against Union. Stefan, I'll let you go first here, but I have a feeling that maybe we're going to see a decision there.
Well, interestingly enough, having said that, I don't think Freiburg taking a point will help them. I actually think Union will only take a point from this game as well, to be perfectly honest with you. Hoffenheim have been quite good at home recently, as we've kind of talked about on the main show. New manager has really turned things around there. I think they've won 3 of the last 4 home games. Where Union have been great at home this season, I think they've actually been, a bit hot and cold on the road. They've only won 1 of the last 5 home away games in the Bundesliga, and that was away to Gladbach. So I think Hoffenheim could be a real issue for Urs Fischer's side this weekend, and I think in kind of classic Bundesliga fashion, at least for this season, we'll probably see 4th and 5th place both draw, when the other one would have probably been desperate for all 3 points considering the circumstances. So yeah, I've gone for a 2-2 draw in this one, as I did for the Freiburg game.
That's actually the last result the two teams had when they played each other in Hoffenheim, was a 2-2 draw, Stefan. The last 2 results, though, were 2-1 wins for Union Berlin, which is what I've gone with, which would be enough for them to qualify if the Freiburg result is what we think it is. But even if they both draw, the goal differential for Freiburg is +6. The goal differential for Union Berlin is +14. So let's say they do both draw. It would take a massive swing in the final match day for this to go a different way, in terms of Union not making it to the Champions League. So I guess champagne corks in Berlin, maybe. Berlin finally has a Champions League team. It's not going to be the next team that we're going to talk about, because while one team is celebrating the return of Berlin to the Champions League, potentially, another might be celebrating, or not celebrating, ushering in the second Bundesliga era, because that is Hertha against Bochum, and that is a huge game. It's a really huge game. If you watch any game on Saturday on the main fixtures, that could be the one. And I think, I don't know how you feel about this. I think Hertha would need a miracle to beat Bochum that day. I went for a 2-0 Bochum win, which would be massive for them, right? And would be disaster for Hertha. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's another game in which I really struggled to pull these two teams apart. I think it's very, in my opinion, it's very easy to kind of look at that fixture and say, well, Bochum should be winning it. Obviously, Hertha or, obviously down their luck. They've all but basically accepted relegation at this point. But I also kind of look at Bochum's away form in the Bundesliga this season, which is truly dreadful. 2 wins from 16 games, 12 defeats. And I kind of look at the fact that Hertha haven't been exactly terrible at home. Not been great by any means, but they've only lost 2 of the last 5, and it kind of makes me think they'll probably put up a bit of a fight. Not nearly enough to obviously save themselves, but I think this one's going to ultimately end 1-1, which wouldn't really do either team any favours. So I think it'll be a deeply frustrating match for both sides.
That was the other result I almost went with. I just don't know if there's much life left in this Hertha side. That collapse against Köln was so dramatic. It would take a massive swing for them to, I think, do anything. But we'll see. I think it's a hugely fascinating fixture, as is this next one, Schalke against Frankfurt. What's your thoughts here, Stefan?
So this might be the old romantic in me, but for some reason I just feel like Schalke are going to win this game. They have been so hot and cold recently. Obviously, the manner of their defeat to Bayern last weekend was, nothing short of embarrassing. But they have, as we continue to talk about, they have been impressive since basically the turn of the year. We've kind of wrote a lot about it. We talked a lot about it on the podcast in terms of how they have slowly but surely turned things around, and specifically at home. I think they do look like a pretty formidable team. And I do kind of feel like Thomas Rice's side will be kind of watching or looking at the prospect of playing this Frankfurt side who, in terms of like form, have been dreadful over the course of the last 10 games in the Bundesliga. They've been the 3rd worst team in the league. In terms of, away form, they're dead, stuck in the middle of the table. They've lost the last 4 home games. Excuse me. So this kind of feels like one team who are desperately clawing at anything that they can get and fighting for their lives against another team who have recently found out their head coach is leaving, who is expecting to lose a number of key players in the summer window, and has very little left to play for in the Bundesliga. So this should be a game that Schalke win, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 win for the Royal Blues.
Yeah, I think I've changed my result 4 or 5 times on this. I want Schalke to win this game, and I hope you're right. But Bülter not being in the squad, I think, is a big loss. And Frankfurt did look pretty impressive against Mainz. There is still a chance they could qualify for Europe through the league. I know it's small, but they also, it just feels that they needed that big result, and they got it against Mainz. And I hope I'm wrong, but I think Frankfurt are going to win this game 2-1.
Interesting.
I think you're right. I hope you are right and I am wrong, but I just, not having Bülter in this game is going to be a struggle. Which of course, this result comes with all sorts of other implications, right? In terms of how this is going to go on matchday 34, especially considering how the other teams are going to play. But let's see. This next one is the definition of a dead rubber. That's Werder against Köln. I don't want to dwell too much on this one. I went for a 3-1 Köln win based on what I've seen against Hertha. The fact that Werder Bremen don't really seem to have much to play for anymore. Still without Füllkrug. I think they're already on the beach. Köln, also maybe on the beach, but just seem in better form. So I went for a 3-1 Köln win here.
Yeah, I've gone for something very similar, actually. I've gone for a 2-0 win for Cologne. Completely agree with you. Werder Bremen looking all sorts right now. Their home form in particular is quite poor. Whereas Cologne's away form's actually been okay. It's been relatively solid. So Yeah, I think this is one of the easier ones to predict, and I've gone for a very comfortable 2-0 win for Cologne.
Yeah. Okay, so the main event. Bayern against Leipzig. This is my match of the week, obviously. It's also Stefan's match of the week. It's all our matches of the week, as is, of course, the game that we need to talk about later, Augsburg against Dortmund. But this is the main event on Saturday. This is the top spiel. It is a top spiel in every category. It is the game that everyone is going to keep an eye on. It is the game that could potentially decide the title, although don't count out Köln at home against Bayern either, right? Everyone loves a party, no more than Cologne fans, but this is the most realistic of all the stumbling blocks. And I've seen this game a few times live, Stefan. I've seen Leipzig against Bayern in the Allianz. I've seen it in Leipzig. I've seen that famous 4-5 defeat by Leipzig to Bayern in Leipzig's first season. I was at the Allianz Arena a few years ago when Leipzig and Bayern battled each other to, I can't remember, it was 0-0 or 1-1 draw. It was a tight match. And that's exactly what I'm expecting here. Leipzig need a final point to secure the Champions League spot. And are you guys ready? Drum rolls. They're going to get it. I went for 1-1 draw.
It must be so uncomfortable sitting on the bench, on the fence as you are right now. I think this was a tricky one for me to predict because Leipzig have looked very good recently. We've seen them beat some really impressive teams this season. I saw them in the flesh when they beat Real Madrid in the Champions League this season, and Celtic, although it's probably not as impressive. And we have seen them really go kind of toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich in recent seasons. The squad know how to do it. They don't often come out with the result they want, but they usually put on a good performance against Bayern more often than not. More so than Dortmund, I would say.
Yeah.
However, I think if you kind of look at the way that Leipzig have been playing this season and where they've been picking up most of their points, they have been at home. Their home form is pretty formidable. They've picked up as many points as Bayern, actually, in the Bundesliga this season in front of their own fans. But if you look at that away form, they're well below, Bayern, Freiburg, Wolfsburg, Dortmund, Leverkusen, Union Berlin, and they're 7th in the table, actually. And I think if you compare that to the fact that despite Bayern's issues, I feel like Bayern will just kind of go into not cruise control, but just almost like they'll just kind of revert back to their basic instincts and put on a really solid performance, as we saw in Tuchel's first game in the Klassiker against Dortmund. And how things have just kind of reverted back to mediocrity since then is probably quite telling, actually. But the fact that it's at home, the fact that it's at the Allianz Arena, which is a big deal for Bayern, just makes me think that despite all the narrative and all the hope and all the fanfare in this game, I just feel like Bayern are going to dismantle Leipzig. So I've actually gone for a 3-1 win for Bayern Munich.
Ooh, big shout. Dortmund fans are not going to like to hear that.
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, it comes down to what you want and what you think will happen. And often the case, we like the idea of a title challenge and the hope that Leipzig can do Dortmund a favour. But I think they can do it. But if they were to do it, I think it'd be extremely unlikely, or it'd be extremely unexpected, shall I say? And it really would be a turn up for the books if Leipzig were to go to the Allianz Arena, beat Bayern or take points off Bayern and subsequently hand the title to Dortmund, because it would literally be something we haven't seen in over a decade in German football.
Well, wait, Dortmund still have to win their own match too. So, you know what? I do think, I don't know, I'm strangely, I don't know what I'm feeling about, but I just think that this Leipzig team is in extremely good form at the moment, and all their players are coming in form at just the right time. Whether it is Nkunku, whether it's No, I completely lost it. Werner, Olmo, Soboslai, all these players are all coming into form at just the right time. Whereas Bayern, they did get that really big result against Schalke, but they did not look great against Bremen. They did not look good. Oh my goodness, I'm losing it against Mainz. So if I do think that also that Rose is going to keep this very tight. I don't think Leipzig wants to go into a situation where they have to secure their Champions League spot on the final match day. So, this is it. If it happens, it happens here. And I think there is some really good reasons why it could happen. But you make a really good point. It is Bayern Munich. They play at home. They do show up for the big fixtures. I wrote my newsletter this week on Serge Gnabry, right, and how important he has been. And I think this is one of our Substack readers made this really important point, that this is the game to show that what his recent form has been, that it actually matters, right? So, that is a few of the storylines I'm going to keep an eye on. This is going to be hugely fascinating. But watch it. Maybe Bayern will smash Leipzig 3-1 and then lose against Köln in the final match day.
Now, that would be very wishful thinking.
That would be very wishful thinking. Exactly. It comes down to this game. So let's wait and see. It's going to be hugely fascinating. All right. So that gets us into the Sunday fixtures. Mainz against Stuttgart. That's huge. I think Stuttgart can basically react to anything that's happened on the Saturday, right? In terms of what the teams around him have done. I kind of get the sense that Mainz have struggled a little bit. I think I jinxed them when I wrote that Dani da Costa article. And I kind of just feel that Stuttgart are going to win this. They're going to win this 2-0, and it could be a huge result for them with everything that's going on in the relegation battle.
I've kind of remained a little diplomatic on this front. Mainz I actually agree with you in terms of Mainz. They haven't looked fantastic recently.
It's the Bayern curse. They beat Bayern.
Yeah, well, exactly. They've lost the last 3 games, but their home form is still pretty solid. So I was still kind of willing to give them credit for that. And, whereas Stuttgart have kind of turned things around, they still have kind of struggled on the away from home, despite everything, as we saw against that recent defeat to Hertha Berlin. So I think Stuttgart will take a point from this game. I kind of agree with you that, this is a game which they probably should be looking to win, much like Schalke will be looking to win that Frankfurt game. But I've gone for a 2-2 draw in this one because I'm struggling to kind of take them apart. So I'm not sure if that does Stuttgart any favours in the long run. I guess it probably doesn't if Schalke win. But yeah, that's just the way I kind of see it right now.
Yeah. All right. So your match of the week, drum rolls, Augsburg against Dortmund. Dortmund will have to respond to whatever happens at the Allianz Arena, which we disagree on. So let's see. What do you think? What's going to happen in this one at home for Augsburg?
So there are reports kind of circling today that Jude Bellingham will miss this game through injury. And I was so close to kind of tweeting something along the lines of and so it begins, because it feels like every time Dortmund are approaching something magical, injuries just seem to pop out of the ground. So I think this is a game in which they'll probably have to do it without Jude Bellingham, which I think will be a huge loss for them because he does really drive that team on in a number of ways. Not to mention his very direct goals and assists, which is a leader for at Dortmund. But having said that, the manner in which they kind of broke Wolfsburg down last weekend, Gladbach and Wolfsburg the weekend before that, the thing that really impressed me there, and I think the thing that would really give me a lot of courage if I was a Dortmund fan, wasn't so much the number of goals or the way that they've kind of battered these sides. It's the fact that certain players really look on form. Julian Brandt looked back to his best, but perhaps more than anything else, Sebastian Haller looked really sharp in the box. We've kind of talked about him quite a lot recently since he's come back. He's had some, we always prefix it by saying it's incredible that he's playing at all. He's been a true inspiration to just about anyone who's followed the Bundesliga this season. But there have been a number of games in which he has looked really sluggish, he hasn't looked fit, and Dortmund have kind of struggled to kind of replace him because they don't really have a replacement. But last week he looked really sharp. He looked like the kind of 30-40 million euro number 9 that they'd signed last summer. And all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, he really brings an extra dimension to that attack, especially with guys like Daniel Malin or Karim Adeyemi or Julian Brandt playing off him. So that leads me to think that even without Jude Bellingham, they should have enough to kind of beat this Augsburg team. I've got no doubt it'll be tight. I've got no doubt it'll be heart attack inducing drama, but I think they will scrape by, and I've gone for a 2-1 win for Dortmund.
Yeah, that's exactly what I have. And I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I have exactly those sort of feelings about this match. Augsburg has been a difficult place to play for them in the past. And, it's only 45 minutes away from where the Allianz is, by car or train. I've driven this many times. I've taken the train many times. And it's kind of interesting that, that this maybe decisive weekend for the title race is being held such a close distance from one another. It would be even more exciting if this game was played on the same time. But Fußball ist kein Wunschkonzert, as they say in German, right? So here we are. I think this is going to be fascinating. All right. Last and least, probably, because I don't actually think that this match might have implication one way or another, and it all depends on what's happening as we record this. In this Europa League fixture for Leverkusen, right? They face Roma. And I think that match and the way it ends might have some implications for this. Leverkusen at home against Gladbach. This is a Rhine derby. There's many. Of course, Gladbach and Köln only consider the games against Leverkusen a Rhine derby if they win it. Otherwise, it's just a game against Leverkusen. And I think this is going to be just a game against Leverkusen. There's so much stuff happening with Gladbach at the moment, Stefan. You wrote your newsletter on it. So if you want to, the Farke situation is hugely complicated, it seems. Hugely unnecessary, in my opinion. So I agree with what you wrote. But I think that Leverkusen are going to smash Gladbach 3-0. That's the result I went for.
Yeah, I think, it's going to be really tricky for Gladbach because, and the kind of thing I wrote about in my newsletter this week was that, they do often look hopeless on the road, but they've looked pretty formidable at home. And while that's encouraging when you have a home game to look forward to the weekend, it's actually quite harrowing if you're a Gladbach fan right now who's kind of hoping the club won't react and won't sack Farke, because I do kind of I agree with you. I think Leverkusen will win this. I think it'll be a tight game just because I think Leverkusen will throw everything at Roma tonight. We're recording this just before kickoff, so I can't really add anything to that.
Which is confusing because we're actually recording something after kickoff, but
which will go out before this.
After
yes,
final
exactly.
whistle, which will go out before this show. So this is a little confusing, but
exactly. But yeah, I think Leverkusen will probably I think that game will take a lot from them. So, for example, the likes of Florian Wirtz might not start, Moussa Diaby might be benched, etc., etc. But I do think they'll probably win it in the end. So I've gone for a 2-1 win for Leverkusen, which won't do Gladbach or Daniel Farke any good. But that's unfortunately, I think that's the way it's going to go.
I think it's going to be hugely fascinating to see what happens if Leverkusen do turn around the Roma result, because will they still care about this? right? Anyways, that's a discussion for the Leverkusen post-game podcast, which will be out before this show is out. So listen back, subscribe, the Leverkusen reaction show. There's actually a lot of Leverkusen content in this, not just the reaction to the Roma fixture, but we're also talking about some of the things that are going on in Leverkusen right now, right? We refrain to talking about 2 transfers, one done, one potentially still happening, on the transfer show for a reason this week, because we wanted to pack it all into the Leverkusen show. So give that a listen. It has some really interesting content in it. But yes, that wraps up match day 33, which I think we both can agree on isn't quite decision day yet. So yeah, as always, brought to you by Bet Online in association with Get German Football News. Stefan, we're almost there. I say that because, match day 34 is almost here. Decisions are not made on match day 34, though. I booked a ticket to Germany yesterday. So I am there after match day 34. I thought maybe of going to Germany for match day 34, but Köln and Dortmund aren't exactly easy to reach from Munich. Because, in terms of getting accreditation, but also staying in those 2 towns on match days can be difficult. So I am flying in after the match day. We will have some special match day 34 content, so be aware of that. But I will be there for the relegation playoffs, the German Cup final, and in my infinite wisdom, I also booked accreditation for the Europa League final. That's a maybe. But Stefan, lots of content still coming your way, even after match day 34 is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Should be good fun.
Anyways, enjoy this match day. Hopefully we'll have another match day after this where we can really be excited about lots of decisions to be made. Enjoy it. This has been the most fun title race in probably... in the last 10 years, it's probably been the best, even better than the last time Dortmund challenge. So enjoy it, and we'll be back soon with more content. Until then, auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.